and the knocking's still going on at the front door.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs. There was the Kardashian woman.
No way.
Top 37 companies earning money were fossil fuel companies, and the amount of tax they paid was 30. Not 30 billion,
Yeah, $30.
not 30,000, $30. I live within 8 kilometres of the largest explosives factory in the known universe.
What?
Where is that? My name's Sarah Perkins Kirkpatrick, and I'm a professor of climate science at the Australian National University in Canberra.
I'm Iain Strachan, a former journalist turned science communicator. We're members of the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for the Weather of the 21st Century.
And this is Totally Cooked, the climate and weather podcast. We're very grateful to be joined by one of the great figures in Australian science communication, Dr. Karl
Kruszelnicki.
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 I should
You must be a
know.
real journo, because only journos get it on the first couple of goes.
I think that I have learnt a lot about pronouncing surnames other than Anglo surnames from watching a lot of football, as in soccer.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's a real football.
Real football,
Okay.
yeah. So for our listeners around the world, I would liken Karl to, say, Brian Cox in the UK or Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson in the US. But here in Australia, he is synonymous with making science fun and accessible.
You've been on the radio and the TV since I was in school, if not before. That's you're one of my first introductions to science.
I did my first story on climate change in 1981. Were you born then?
No, I was a few years
So I was
later.
doing radio before you were born.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
And
That's all right.
we're not young. Like if we were,
Well, I'm not
teenagers
young.
or Gen Z interviewing you, then it's like, okay, fair enough.
I'm
But
comfortably middle-aged.
yeah,
so-
I think I'm 39 last Saturday or the week before,
Happy
so I'm
birthday.
pretty much middle-aged now as
Yeah,
well.
you are.
Oh dear.
One of us.
So
One
as you've
of
just said,
us.
Karl, you've actually preempted one of my first talking points, which is always the sign of an excellent, talented, intuitive guest. You began communicating about science on the radio and on the television in the 80s. Can you remember when you first heard about the concept of global warming or climate change?
I was working as a scientific officer in the hospital system in the late 70s, and I was reading The New Scientist. Our job was to thread a small pipe into the coronary arteries of somebody on the operating table and squirt dye into the coronary artery and see where it was blocked. And there were various down periods, and I would read The New Scientist in my little scientific officer hole. And there was this article in New Scientist about how the world's largest insurance company had recognised that this thing called the greenhouse effect was real and was going to charge more money because they were seeing events in certain areas that were related, these extreme climate events that were directly related, in their opinion, to climate change, and nothing personal. They were going to charge business more money. Now, if they were wrong, they would go broke because the other insurance companies would not charge. But if they were right, all the other insurance companies around the world would, and they did.
Yes.
So beginning in 1973, insurance companies started charging more for extreme weather events. And I was reading this in 1977. I was thinking, really? And so I started reading up on this thing called global warming greenhouse effect way back then.
And that's quite a niche, way to come across it. You were working in medicine, you were reading a scientific
No, I was
magazine.
working in science.
Sorry, you were working in science,
Yep.
reading a scientific magazine, and the lens that you accessed it through was insurance or business,
Yeah.
the relationship with business to
Yeah.
climate change. When do you think it started to become more mainstream? When did you see mass media starting to talk about it?
Very easy. Al Gore, who was going to be the next
Right.
president of the United States,
Yep.
in that movie. So I have written 48 books or so, and in virtually all of my books, I've done a story on climate change,
Okay.
permafrost,
Yep.
ocean acidification, different aspects of climate change over the years. There's always a story in one of my books about climate change, and I was always talking about it, and I could see it getting more and more powerful. I could see the weather events getting more extreme. And then when Al Gore talked about it, what was the movie called?
An Inconvenient Truth.
What year was that?
Jinx.
Like
2006, I think.
yeah,
wasn't
I
it?
was just
Roughly?
finishing up my undergrad that year.
And then it became really popular
Yeah.
in the media.
And I'm surprised to hear you say that because I remember, being aware of environmental issues at school, part of the
Yeah.
curriculum in the
Same
UK
here.
and Australia in the 90s.
Yep.
So that's quite a big jump from you first coming across it in the late 70s in a niche outlet to your perception of it being very mainstreamed is, mid 2000s. Like that's quite a long time.
It
and,
is. It was something that I picked up that what Karl said was about, private industry or private insurance industry picking this up well before it was in, I guess, the zeitgeist. And I even think now a lot of the time it's the private companies that are sometimes taking it more seriously than the politicians. They're like, right, we've got to change this. They have their own CAT modelling in insurance companies to try and predict.
What modelling?
CAT modelling, catastrophic modelling, they call it, but the CAT models
Oh,
they use.
so CAP modelling.
CAT, C-A-T.
Meow.
CAT, as in catastrophe.
Yeah.
Thank you for introducing me to a new term. I shall drop it casually into conversation.
Is that because major corporations think we've got 9 lives when we're dealing with climate change?
I dare say it comes from catastrophic.
Okay, right.
So getting back to the point that you were making about the companies being more involved, we've got 2 of the big players politically in the world being the USA and China. And on one hand, USA is going down the pathway at the moment of trying to generate as much energy as possible from fossil fuels and burn fossil fuels. And on the other hand, and it's because they've got fossil fuels to burn underground.
Yes, correct.
And on the other hand, China is, because they don't have that many fossil fuels underground, they're going down a different pathway of going renewable. So they're going on totally different pathways, and yet not the slightest iota of why they're doing it is related to climate change.
It's all
in each case, it's to do with geopolitical economy and political power and military power.
Yes.
And the fact that China's doing stuff that will reduce climate change and the USA is going down the opposite pathway, neither of them care about climate change. It's purely to do with their own selfish, I want more power.
Yep. No argument from me there. And it's disappointing to see that because, in the 90s we had the Kyoto Protocol where literally the world got together and said, let's reduce chlorofluorocarbons. They're creating a hole in the ozone layer. We need to stop this. And it was done. So it's disappointing, for want of a better word, that we're not doing the same here. Any changes, a lot of the changes we're seeing isn't coming from that. We need to fix this problem.
I can tell you why.
Why?
The CFC manufacturers, they were small fry.
That is true.
A few dozen companies,
a very good point.
whereas with oil, they were running the world quietly from behind the scenes.
For a
with
long time.
And they're still running it and they've got infinite money.
Yeah.
And we have the situation today, if you look up the International Monetary Fund, they have reports called Energy Subsidy Reform. Energy is energy. Reform means we're going to change. And subsidy means the opposite of investment. So a subsidy is you come to me and say, hey, Karl, I've got this idea. To make money, I need to borrow $100. And I say, sure, give me $105 back in a year. And that's an investment. So you go and do your thing. You make $150. You keep $45. I get $5. We're both happy. That's an investment. Subsidy, you come say, hey, Karl, I'm having a party. I need $100 to buy a lot of goon, which is, for Australian talk, for those cardboard boxes of wine.
You had my attention. Now you have my interest.
Goon of fortune.
Okay, and then I give you the money, and that's a subsidy. So the fossil, according to the 2 studies, one in 2013 looking at the 6 previous years up to 2012, and then another one looking from 2013 up to the next 6 years up to 2020, roughly, and there's another report coming out this year, the amount of money given to fossil fuel companies as a subsidy is...
I'm not going to like this, am I?
4% back then. And now currently in 2024, the latest study was that it was the fossil fuel companies were getting 7% of the world's GDP as a subsidy. This is on top of the profits that they make. So if you have a relative who's working at McDonald's to earn money, 7 cents out of every dollar goes as free money to the fossil fuel companies on top of the massive profits that they make. But then on the other hand, subsidies aren't bad because you might have a child in your family and you don't turn around and say, hey, look, Jacinda, look, we know you're 8 years old and you're doing well at school and we do love you. But honestly, look, you haven't contributed anything to the family income. We've been subsidising you for the last 8 years. We're going to set you to work in the coal mine. So subsidies are good because it turns out that in the long term, if you get an education over 20 years, it'll be better for the economy and the family to do that So subsidies are good. And so the International Monetary Fund, and they're the heavy hitters, said they looked at the question of, did the subsidies to the fossil fuel companies improve the situation? And no, they made the world economy worse. So we've got the situation where they're making the economy worse and they're getting 7% of the world's GDP as a subsidy, plus they're subverting the science on climate change, which they did since 1990, with rates that up to $1 billion a year.
And so we have the, this is, fascinating, the behind the scenes take on what's been happening around policy development, around industrial practice. Running parallel to that is the public perception of this issue. So in your experience as a person who's been communicating about science in the media for a long time, how do you think, or what's your recollection around how the public started to respond as awareness of climate change and global warming became wider scale? What do you recall about the responses? Were people hesitant to engage in it? Were they sticking their head in the sand? Were the general public becoming increasingly alarmed? What do you remember from those sort of 80s and 90s and early 2000s period?
Well, having been in there from 1981, I've observed the 5 stages of lies that the fossil fuels companies have done, especially in that book by Naomi Oreskes called...
Yes, I was going to say An Inconvenient Truth. Merchants of Doubt.
Merchants of Doubt. Read that book.
Yes.
Read that book.
Yes.
And so the first stage, which Sky TV still goes with, is that there's no such thing as global warming.
I can't believe they're still beating that drum. I cannot believe it after all this time. But anyway.
I find Sky TV, you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yes.
So for the audience who don't know, the Dunning-Kruger effect is an inverse relationship between confidence and knowledge.
Yes.
And so when some people have very small knowledge, they're incredibly confident.
Yeah.
And so I tend to see Sky TV presenters as being a mixture of the Dunning-Kruger effect and the village idiot.
Yep.
Being very unfair.
Hard agree.
Okay, moving right along. So the first stage was, and I've seen this evolve over the decades, there's no such thing as global warming.
Yep.
The second stage, there is global warming, but it's just natural. The cycles just go by themselves, and this is part of it. The third stage is, okay, there is global warming, and we caused it, but honestly, it's going to be good because you won't have to wear so many jumpers in winter. The fourth stage is global warming's happening, and it is a bit messy, and we did cause it, but really the effects are only very minor. And the fifth stage is, look, global warming is happening, and we did cause it, and it is real, and it is costing the economy a bit of money. But honestly, the fossil fuels are the only way to get energy. Renewables just don't work. Fossil fuel cars are so much more reliable than electric vehicle cars, and so we're stuck with burning fossil fuels. And that's the combination of lies that they give to different parts of the population. And then, depending on the worldview of the population, you get different responses.
Yeah.
So, if you've got on one hand somebody who is single, has no obligations, has a good income,
that's me,
and can
tell me more.
read a lot, and you get a good worldview.
Oh, thank you.
And so you can see through the lies.
Yeah.
At the other extreme, this is the case in America, you have a family of, say, 2 parents and 2 kids. Both parents are working 3 jobs between them. Between the 3 jobs, they can afford to pay rent, but they can't afford to buy food. And so they're on charity. And there's something like tens of millions of those in the USA alone, where you've got the working poor who, even though they're working flat out, cannot feed their children. And they do not have the time to understand and get a worldview on climate change.
Or the ability to do that, really.
Okay.
Like they don't have the, necessarily the education. They
don't
don't
the
know
agency.
how. The agency.
Like the agency.
And so what we have as a result of various political deals in Australia in the past, in 3 states, the only news you get is Murdoch News on print.
Yeah.
And that's South Australia, Queensland, and Tasmania.
Yeah.
And if you've been lied to for 30 years,
well, of course you're going to believe
you'll
it.
say, oh, there's no such thing as climate change. Sure, I read it in the paper.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question on, that was a long-winded answer to how do the public respond, it responds on their ability to have a worldview.
Yeah.
And some people don't have time because they're working flat out just to feed their kids.
Yeah. Well, even I would hopefully say I'm well educated and have a good worldview, but
if you're not, we're in real trouble.
That's a very good point. But we've struggled with this in the past too. Like, what do we need to do to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions? We know what we need to do, but can we afford it? Getting a solar rig on your roof isn't cheap. Buying an electric car isn't cheap. It's cheaper, and yes, it's more efficient. But if you're struggling to pay your daycare bills and put food on the table and pay your mortgage, that's not the first priority, is buying, a solar rig, even though it pays out in the long term.
But only if you ignore hidden externalities and you take a short-term point of view.
Yes, but that's the thing,
Let me tell you about the short-term point of view. We'll pick on poor Jacinta again. And unfortunately, Jacinta has come down with a terrible disease, which is fatal, and she's going to die.
Oh, stop the recording.
But Jacinta is just this lovely, bubbling powerhouse of happiness and enthusiasm. And you know that were she to survive, she would be good for the family, and she'd interact and bring the family together as a unit, and she'd also pay lots of taxes over the years, which is good for the economy. But in the short term, so it will cost $10,000 to do the operation, but in the short term, a funeral's only $2,000. Just let the little bastard die. Because that's the better short-term result, and that is the way that our economy runs. So it's gone from yearly reporting to quarterly reporting for companies, So if you have a project in your private company and it's going to take more than 3 months to give a return, forget it. We've got to have a return in 2.5 months. And the thing I like about private enterprise is it can be efficient, but doesn't necessarily have morals. The thing I like about governments is, well, they should have morals.
They should have
and they should have the long-term point of view.
Yeah.
And I see this as a failing of government, that we've been put into a situation where, for example, in Australia, we do no longer see education as a worthwhile investment in the future, where it pays off enormously. And rather, we're seeing it as a way to make short-term money. And so we're ending up with an uneducated population. And we've got, now in Australia, we can't make our own paper, white paper for photocopy.
Yep.
And we can no longer make, this is a 3,000-year-old, this is a 10,000-year-old technology. We can't even make bricks in mass production. We have to buy them from Indonesia. But we can export dirt. And as a result of that, I live within 8 kilometres of the largest explosives factory in the known universe.
What?
Where is that?
In Australia.
Where is it?
It's in Mascot, in Botany Bay.
No way. I didn't know this.
Because
this is a real bombshell.
Good pun. Australia is better than any other country in the world at getting some dirt and then putting explosives in it, breaking it into little particles, putting it on trains, putting it onto ships and sending it overseas. There is no other country that is better than that. On the other hand, we can't make a car engine or a motor vehicle or, wait for it, even photocopy paper or bricks.
Can I just say that that's not something to be proud of, is digging up dirt and sending it overseas.
Blowing up dirt.
Or blowing up dirt.
Blowing up dirt.
We're very good at it.
We're good at it. It's not like we can do better.
Well, the other thing is that the fossil fuel companies don't pay any tax. So in the year 2021, the top 37 companies on stock earning money were fossil fuel companies, and the amount of money that they earned was 1/10 of the Australian GDP, which was $150 billion. And in that calendar year, the amount of tax they paid was 30. Not 30 billion.
Yeah, $30.
Not 30,000, $30. And in terms of being able to provide infrastructure for the Australian population, in terms of roads and schools and education and medical care, that would be enough to provide 6 cups of coffee for the 25 million Australians spread across 365 days of the year, which I worked out is 0.00004 mil, which I checked with my friends in chemistry, is too small to see with the naked eye. So they should be paying tax. But on the other hand, they get 7 cents out of every dollar that Australians earn.
How about this? We talked about subsidies earlier. Why aren't we subsidising the rollout of green energy more appropriately? That's, short-term pain for want of, putting money into it, but long-term gain in terms of a better future.
I'm blaming you because in the 2007 election, did you vote for me to become a senator in the Australian Federal Parliament?
I don't remember, so therefore I'm going to say no. I'm sorry.
Right, see, it's your fault.
Everything.
Awkward. And you too,
really
Iain.
Well, I'm not eligible. I was living in the UK and was not a citizen. So
I just remember Kevin 07. That's all I remember from the 07 election.
I went for the Climate Change Coalition.
Okay.
Okay, so in the federal Senate, there's 76 politicians.
Yep.
And I could have been one of them.
I'm really sorry.
You didn't vote for me. That's okay. You were in Canberra. I was in
I was living
in New South Wales.
Yeah, I was living
and you
in
didn't vote for me. I still regard you as my bestie. That's okay.
That's awkward, isn't it?
But the point I'm getting to is that on one hand, the USA and China care nothing about climate change.
Yeah.
And we need politicians who do.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to vote for them. Luckily, we've got a few good things on our side.
We do. Things are improving here, definitely. But we had, I guess the climate wars in Australia for well over a decade, and occasionally someone tries to re-spark them. That can make it challenging.
Things are improving here, and I think they're improving through better awareness of what's...
It's funny, funny you say that, and I would agree. But Black Summer definitely changed.
That was huge.
The
I mean,
picture.
natural disasters and unnatural disasters help to shift opinion, but I think science communication plays a really important role as well. And you've done a lot of that in your career, Karl.
Thanks.
You've done a lot of science communication over the years, and I'm interested in your take on what makes for good science communication. What are the crucial things you need to do?
You've got to tell them a story that they can tell to somebody else. You've got to give them something that they can then impress somebody else with at a party.
Right. So fun facts. Factoids, as my 8-year-old says.
But the way I do it is I turn everything into a 3 to 5 minute story.
Okay.
And that takes me something between 3 and 20 hours.
So that's a conscious tactic of yours, because you've told a lot of stories already on this episode which have been really informative, but that's something that you consciously do to get a message across.
Well, if you watch the historical narratives like Xena, the warrior woman.
Yeah, I remember that.
Xena,
yeah, I do.
right?
Yeah.
And you would come across the concept that there are people who survive entirely by telling stories back in the old days in ancient Greece or wherever it was. And so I'm just following that formula for a story, which is that you have a hook that drags them in.
Yep.
You give them an explanation which makes them feel smarter, and you finish off with a joke. And the story is something that stays in your... Like, for example, I'll tell you a story. So a couple of weeks ago, just before we took off on the wedding, there was a knocking at 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's somebody knocking on the door, and I looked out the window, and there's this big limousine and this enormous gorilla-like bodyguard, and the knocking's still going on at the front door.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs, and there was the Kardashian woman.
No way.
She was knocking on the front door saying, "Hey, look, I've been a big fan of all your work for a while. I've heard that you've never been on a private jet. I know you want to go on a private jet. So grab Mary. I've done all my research. So grab your passport, grab Mary, and I'll take you on a flight in a private jet." And we end up flying to Washington, D.C.
Which Kardashian?
The big one. Number one.
Number one. Okay. Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Chloe.
So,
no, Kim
Kardashian. So she took us there, and in Washington, D.C., we had a nude bath with all the world politicians. We realised that all world politicians are actually shape-changing reptiles from the planet Zog.
Right, okay.
I'm going to stop right now.
Okay.
So what I've done is told you a story.
Yep.
If I gave you those words in alphabetical order, you could not remember them.
No.
But in a story you can, and you can repeat that story to somebody else. So when I do my stuff on science communication, I do not give facts. I give stories into which facts are woven, and they invisibly feel through, so people can then tell the story. So that's the reason I go for the story.
Yeah.
Because it's an ancient thing from Xena, the warrior woman, going back thousands of years, which was, I didn't know they had TV then, but obviously they must have had.
They must have.
So my main thing in science communication is telling stories. And like the one I did on Bitcoin just about killed me. It took me 40 hours to understand Bitcoin. And for a brief period of time, I understood what a nonce was and how to make one.
I have never understood Bitcoin or NFTs or anything like that. It's beyond the scope of my comprehension.
I did a 4-part series on Bitcoin. So look up ABC, Dr. Karl Bitcoin, and in 4 or 5 minute episodes, you get 40 hours of my hard work encapsulated.
I think that might be the way in.
The Bitcoin?
Yes, to understand it.
Bitcoin.
Save us that 40.
But it turns out it's not totally anonymous. There are ways to track it back now.
How much does personality come into it? So let's say you've sat down and you've got a narrative like you've described, telling a story to get that evidence or that information across. How much does the person delivering it matter and how they deliver it?
I'll give you 2 extremes. I've actually seen this at a medical conference. A person came on the stage. They signalled to the person at the back of the room to start the video going. The video started going. The video came out in a monotone, really boring. They're just reading off a sheet. And then if you look at multiple sclerosis, it turns out there's a relationship, and it was done in a monotone. They then stood on a stage next to this very boring video for 20 minutes and then answered any questions in a very boring monotone and went off, and it was terrible.
That would turn me off science forever.
The other way is, so I've done a course in Shakespearean acting.
We saw a Shakespearean play last night.
Just a little flex, a little
Which one?
Interjection and flex for all the listeners at home. We're going to break the fourth wall and speak straight to you. We went to see Coriolanus last night by Bell Shakespeare.
Yep.
By the time this podcast comes out, the season will be long over, so you've missed it. But it was so good. Have you seen it before?
No.
Carl? It's about...
That's apparently one of the less popular plays of Shakespeare.
It's not often... I've never seen it before live. There's a film of it with Ralph Fiennes and Gerard Butler in. Which I'm now going to watch. But yeah, it's about a general who wins a battle against a neighboring tribe. He is put forward to be consul, but the plebeians reject his consulship. And so in a fit of pique, he falls out with them, he's banished, and he returns at the head of his former enemies to take his revenge on Rome. I won't give any more away because there'll be spoilers, but it is so good.
Spoilers. It's a Shakespearean play.
We loved it. 500 years statute of limitations. And it was brilliant. So Shakespearean.
So I did a course every Tuesday night for about 6 weeks, 3 hours on Shakespearean acting. And one of the things I learned was that the king never stands next to anything.
You mean a prop or a person?
No, the king doesn't stand next to a prop or a person because that shows the king is weak and needs to hide behind that prop. So you do not stand at a lectern.
Yeah, okay.
So with regard to presentation, firstly, you engage the audience, and it's taken me a long time to do that. Oh, the other thing people should do if they want to go do science communication, besides doing a course on Shakespeare and acting, do a 3-day comedy course.
They do. There is this comedy in science or something.
Science in the pub?
Yeah, science in the pub.
No, that's different. No. You pay $500 and you do a 3-day course, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
And they teach you things like the callback. Have you heard of the callback? No. So you give a joke at the beginning, and then later you refer to it, and even though you don't make a joke about it, just referring it, the audience goes, ah.
Yeah.
And you try to use the letter K.
Okay. Why K?
Why K, yeah.
Okay. Have a look at my mouth while I'm doing it. So here I am saying the letter O.
Yep.
O, duck. See how I'm mimicking a smile?
Yeah, okay.
So that then the audience tries to mirror you through the mirror neurons in the brain, so that makes them start to smile a bit.
Science of science communication.
So you should do that.
Yeah.
And so definitely the presentation style counts for a lot, but you got to have the content.
Yeah.
And I do these talks on how to do presentations.
Yep. Okay. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, this is great.
I will come to my talk.
When are you giving the talk next, and how often do you give it?
This afternoon at 3:00. So if you want to fly, you're flying back.
We're flying back. Well, next time. Is it part of the University of Sydney's?
No, it's just one-off. People asked me to do it, so I just did it.
All right.
Nice.
You can invite me to ANU to come and do it.
Yeah. Or Monash.
Well, you could. We would be really delighted to get you to give it to members of the Centre of Excellence. So that would be Monash, Melbourne, UTAS, ANU, and UNSW at some point.
We'll get your people to talk to my people, and we'll get something happening.
You are the people.
We are the people. Well, we're Sarah and I and our colleagues are giving training to our PhD students and research fellows on.
Very important the way you present. So to answer your question, yes, it is very important how you present. You got to have the content, but then the presentation is most important.
The thing that I liked about the play that we saw was I didn't understand maybe 50%, maybe higher of what exactly they were saying, because it's the old English, I couldn't understand all of the content, but the acting is what brought it to life.
I agree. So I saw Henry V recently as well. It's the first time I've seen Shakespeare for a few years, and you can't follow every single word or every single line because of the way it's constructed. It's 500 years ago, and it's the tone of the delivery, the facial expressions, the body language between the actors, intonation. Yeah, you know what's happening. You know what message has been conveyed or how the narrative is developing, even without completely understanding the dialogue.
Yeah. Most of it, maybe half of it I got, exactly. But because you spend some time thinking about it, but the acting is what sold it.
Yeah.
And what could tell it exactly. And it was set maybe 30 years ago in the 1990s, and they, paid homage to that time really well as well.
The costumes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
It was really well done. So that to me, that kind of, in what you were saying, Karl, was it's not about necessarily the content, it's about how you present it.
As well, yep.
So, we've talked about this as well in climate science communication. Obviously, you need to be right, but it doesn't have to be the precision that we're trained to give as scientists, because we're not talking to ourselves, we're not talking to people like ourselves, we're talking to people that haven't been exposed to this before. So you don't have to have, that exact precision. You just need to know about the topic.
So, there's an inherent contradiction or tension within science communication, which is that there's three very different ways of doing things. There's the way Karl's just described, which is, perfect kind of narrative development, like hook people in, draw them into a story, tell them the story. You've got kind of classic media, mainstream media, whether it's editorial or news, is like, headline, bam, like what's the one thing you need to know, and then you build out with a little bit of context after it. But then science research papers are back to front in that they assume their readers want to know everything and are going to read everything. So they start, they give you an abstract, it's written really in a very esoteric, inaccessible way.
Yep.
There's a kind of an expectation in science writing that you use the most complicated words possible. Wherever, if there is a more fussy way of saying something, you pick it. If you find an even fussier way, you pick that one.
And you pick the passive voice.
Yeah, passive voice.
Not I did this, but this was done.
It is known, it is widely reported, and then you build out this very laborious story, which starts with, here's everything we've ever known in this field. Here's something that my colleagues last year found out about this part of this field. And I've now found out this about this bit of the field, except I'm actually not quite sure about this, and this.
That's you've pretty
and so
much summarized
it makes for a terrible storytelling structure.
Yes.
It assumes you're trained, and that's, and obviously the scientific method and the world of academic publishing has enormous merit, and there's a reason why knowledge is advanced in very specialist fields in that way.
Yeah.
But it is almost, purposely If you wanted to turn people off and not get them involved in it, you couldn't do better than how journal articles are written.
It does not compute with communication.
Yep. So you've got to completely turn it on its head and deconstruct it and reconstruct it.
Well, it's an interesting challenge, but like I've said to Iain many times that I wouldn't say often, but occasionally concerned that what I might say on this podcast won't be correct. And, we'll have experts in our field say, comment on, the precision of what I've said. But that's coming from a science.
Actually, it's this parts per million.
Yeah. It's not 427 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's actually
428.5.
Yeah. It's that sort of level, and that's 427 is right enough for science comms. And that's
You want it to be right in the journal.
Yeah. Yes.
You want it to be perfectly accurate, like completely correct in a journal article. When it comes to science communication, I think what I always say is that you want to convey the spirit of
correct.
the work authentically.
Yeah.
You don't have to be 1,000,000% accurate.
And there's no point because the language doesn't. It's like speaking Shakespearean, right? If you're speaking scientific talk to Joe Bloggs down the pub, cannot compute.
But you've got to have the hook that drags them in.
Exactly.
What kind of stories do you think people respond to best?
A lot of biological stories about their own body and can you get a cure for hangover, as well as things out of left field. But you've got to have that hook, like for example, a buffet, an all-you-can-eat buffet. How can an all-you-can-eat buffet possibly survive where on the planet we have these animals called male teenagers who can empty a fridge just by walking past it and who can eat their own body weight?
Here's today's Simpsons reference. Are you a fan of The Simpsons, Dr. Karl?
I love The Simpsons.
Yep. So I always bring one up.
Yep.
It may increasingly get cut out, otherwise the episodes will go too long. But fairly early on, Homer goes to an all-you-can-eat seafood buffet. He will not stop eating. So eventually they close it and throw him out. So he takes them to court and sues them. And in the court case, the lawyer says to Marge, "And what did you do after you were thrown out of the seafood buffet?" She's like, "Oh, we pretty much went straight home." And he says, "Mrs. Simpson, you're under oath." And she's like, she breaks down and she says, "We drove around for hours and hours trying to find another all-you-can-eat seafood buffet." And the lawyer says, "And when you didn't find one?" She's like, "We went fishing." And he says to the jury, "Do these sound like the actions of a man who had all he could eat?" I think about that like once a week.
I've got a queasy stomach thinking about an all-you-can-eat seafood.
Oh, I know.
So the way they do it is that they have the low-cost items first.
Fill you up on the junk.
Okay.
They have small plates.
Yeah.
And way at the end, they have the higher-cost items. And also, all the food is not fresh. So the chicken chow mein might be yesterday's chicken. The bread pudding might be yesterday's bread. And these are the tricks that they need to be able to survive against the onslaughts of teenagers with infinite appetites.
And they're, like, contrary to that, something I find very unintuitive and frustrating is when you go for, like, a really nice Italian meal. The Italians have so many courses.
They do.
And it's not that they're not filling you up with the, like, lower cost stuff first so that you don't eat lots of the last stuff. They just bring it all out anyway. So, like, you get the, focaccia and the charcuterie board, the antipasto. Charcuterie board. And then you start to get full. And then they bring out, little pizzas. And then they bring out the pasta. And then they'll bring out preemie. And you're like, oh, no, I can't eat this.
Yeah.
So, like, another story I did was we've just discovered how cancer cells get their energy.
How do they?
Have you done any biology?
A little bit in my
undergrad.
Have you
heard of mitochondria?
Yes, yeah.
So in each of your cells, you have mitochondria, which generate energy. Cancer cells extrude a drinking straw towards the nearest nerve, puncture the nerve, and steal its mitochondria.
The little fuckers.
Are they using plastic straws as well? Because that would be bad for the environment.
And isn't that amazing?
It's amazing, but it's just you just want to smash them to bits, don't you? Like, get
great,
the fuck out of my body.
Great narrative device, though.
Yes. But the straw,
to create
the
an
drinking,
image that you can.
And then if you think about that more deeply, you think they're doing that, but if they learned how to do it, how did they pass that knowledge on to the next generation? Because cancer cells kill the creature they're in, so therefore they die.
Yeah, it's in the DNA.
And your answer is in the DNA. Yeah. Okay, question for you without notice. What percentage of our DNA is viruses? You're right,
0.5. 8%. 8%.
8%.
Wait, so viruses we've gotten over our lifetime, or they've just embedded in there from previous?
400 million years ago.
Yeah, okay.
So the only reason that we have mammals is because in the female, the placenta can stick to the inside of the uterus.
That it can.
And the only reason it can stick is because about 450 million years ago,
speaking from experience,
2 viruses called Syncytium A and B migrated into our DNA of what would become us. and then they make the chemicals called syncytium A and B that allow the uterus to stick.
So what happened before that? Did this placenta just fall out? This
There-
is probably
there
going
were no
down really
mammals.
dark. Oh, okay.
So
All right.
450 million, around 450 million years ago, you also had the other big thing,
Yeah.
which was that fire happened.
Right, okay.
Because before that, there wasn't enough oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere to have fire.
Yeah, okay.
No shit.
We had the great oxygenation event 2.2 billion years ago.
Yeah.
But getting back to the question of, okay, so you think about the fact that
Make the atmosphere
Cancers-
great again.
Yes, let's do that.
so cancer cells grow really rapidly because they steal mitochondria from the nearest nerve.
Yeah.
But how did they learn to do this? And I think the answer is that something came into our DNA,
Yeah.
and so it's part of our DNA. So it doesn't have to pass that knowledge on to the next cancer.
Yeah, it's just
the
embedded.
cancers are already in there,
Yeah.
which then takes you on to Peto's paradox, which is how come an elephant, which has 100 times more cells than we have because it's got 100 times the weight,
Yeah.
how come it doesn't have 100 times more cancer? And in fact, it's only got a few times as much cancer.
Oh, lifestyle as well.
GP53. So that's a gene, which is also the name of a protein, which in humans we have 1 or 2 copies per DNA, and that suppresses mutations.
Right.
Elephants got about 50 copies.
Yeah, okay.
Which then leads you on to, if we can genetically modify ourselves to have more copies of GP53 in our DNA, get rid of cancers.
Wouldn't that be?
Wow.
Wow.
So why aren't we doing that? Anyway.
Why aren't we doing that?
All of that from cancers grow really fast because they suck mitochondria
yeah.
out of nerves nearby.
Yeah. So you hooked me in. You got
So
me in.
see,
Yeah.
you got to have the hook.
Yep, you got me in good.
I would like to ask about, so we've got all this amazing information
Mm-hmm.
that we can share, that we can tell these great stories, and the way that we can tell stories, the channels we can use to tell them have changed a lot. So when you started in science communication, we had radio, we had television, we had newspapers and magazines. Now we've got the internet, social media, chat forums,
Podcasts.
exactly. And we even have a US president who is shutting down science and climate research.
Mhm.
So it's a very different world from it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Do you think it's getting harder or easier to do good science communication?
You've got the fact that you can do anything you want on social media. And so I've got a presence on TikTok, and I'm still keeping alive my presence on Twitter because, okay, here's something, another question without notice. Of all of the medical and dental and health and nutrition advice on TikTok, which is just a mirror of what people say, how much is factually correct on TikTok?
I'm going to go 5%.
I was going to say 10.
2.
98%
is lies.
Who's measuring that? Like, how do we believe that's true?
I've got the studies.
I'm about to say there's a scientific study on that. Yeah.
Yeah. But going back, so to their credit, TikTok have in Australia and elsewhere set up a thing called #STEM, where anything that has the hashtag STEM has been fact-checked 3 levels, right?
Are we using that hashtag, Zach? Are we using hashtag Zen?
You should use
We are.
hashtag STEM. Yeah.
Okay, you got to.
He says we are.
Yeah.
Okay. Trust him.
Scrambles to laptop,
Yeah.
edits TikTok, STEM.
So on one hand, you can get the ready availability of crazy opinions, because if somebody is lying in a pool of their own vomit on the street,
We've all been there,
with torn clothing, and a dog is licking their wounds and defecating on them, and they give you a bit of paper that says the earth is flat, you're going to not take any sense of it. But if you see on a computer screen the earth is flat, and wherever you look in that little rabbit hole where you happen to be, it says the earth is flat, then you are more likely to think, I'm seeing it everywhere. Surely the earth is flat. So that's one situation that exists, the going down the rabbit hole. And so what I'm doing is setting up a digital Dr. Karl, who is going to, when we finish this little brief busy period, release 100 TikToks at the rate of 1 a day on climate change, which I'd like to work with you guys on.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right.
We're in for it.
Release them at 1 a day, want them fact checked.
Yeah.
And then people will come into TikTok and Twitter and complain, and we'll pass them on to digital Dr. Karl, who has been fed a database of the 40,000 papers I've collected over the last 4 decades, and we'll try to answer them.
Is this part of your project? Was it a Rockefeller Foundation initiative?
Yeah, so by the way, we should tell everybody, if you want to have a 1 month all expenses paid holiday on Lake Como, do apply for a Rockefeller Bellagio scholarship or fellowship.
Bellissimo.
You go there for 1 month.
Yeah.
And then they have a break of a few days, then in another month. And in each month's cohort, there's about 12 people. And you get the time to be able to think and do nothing except concentrate on your project. And so I was able to spend a month reading up on everything I could find about artificial intelligence and learning the history of it and trying to get a bit of a world view. And so at the same time, we were with my colleague Leek Stark developing a digital Dr. Karl, which hopefully will be able to engage people and bring them out of the rabbit hole of disinformation.
That is a really good ethical use of AI.
If you got the grant and then were found to have spent all day drinking Chianti on Lake Como, would they ask for the money back?
No. Well, they don't give you money.
Aperol Spritz, please.
How do they arrange it?
Well, what they do is they give you a room in a villa that's half 1,000 years old. If you've been to Lake Como, it's shaped like the letter Y, and each arm and down into the base is about 45 kilometres long, and it's pointed just at the point of the Y, at the best possible thing. And so on this point, you've got a couple of thousand people living in a tiny area, and you've got about 20 people living in an equivalent area, and that's where the villa is. And so you get free breakfast every morning. You get 3-course lunch, 3-course dinner. You do have to have cocktails every night at 7 o'clock, and there's often a bit of a talk. And you have got tennis courts you can play.
So all you've got to do is think. You get all of this.
So
all you
it's
have to do is
available
think.
for scholars and artists. So there might be somebody in science communication or a radio presenter or an academic, and you can take a +1 but not a +2. You can't take a kid.
Can't take
So you can take a +1. And so all you have to do is just sit there and think and come up with ideas. And I highly recommend everybody to apply for a Rockefeller Bellagio, Bellagio fellowship. And the application's open for a brief period around February, March each year.
Okay.
And when did you say your work from that will come out, the digital Dr. Karl? When is that being launched?
We're hoping to do it now, but then I foolishly agreed to do another 8-part series of how things work for the ABC TV, which then swallowed up all my free time.
But it's coming.
TV does that.
It's coming.
But we're still working on it.
Yeah,
it's coming. Awesome. It'll be definitely there around the end of August, we think.
So I've got a PhD student looking at AI and how we can better get projections out of climate models using AI. So
I would love to work with your student.
He's very smart. Very smart.
We can do with smart. I'm not particularly smart, but I am well educated. So I'm very happy to work with smart people.
Okay. Right.
What are some of the other ways that we can counter misinformation in this fragmented digital age of ours?
Personally, but what you need is what the military call force amplification. So force amplification is where you just don't go out to fight a whole army. You go out to fight a whole army with rockets and satellites and every other form of force multiplication you have.
So you just keep hitting it and hitting it.
And with more people.
Yeah.
Okay. You just get lots of eyes out there, lots of views. Just give it everything you can. Force multiplication is the way.
So a technique that I tend to use as well is, I don't like this term, but it's what it's used is inoculation. So
tell me more.
Small little bits of information often. So you just keep repeating the same message, maybe packaged slightly differently. And it's always in conversation, always in the, whatever conversation is going around. Like, yes, it's been a cold winter, but did you know temperatures are doing this long term? Or, that's happening, that wine variety isn't available. Yes, that's affected by climate change. Like, it's that little tidbits just going back and forth, woven into everyday conversations. And it builds up that very general knowledge base, but with factual information that's relevant.
I love that technique.
Yeah. Inoculation needs a better term than inoculation.
Yeah. Inoculation and force multiplication.
Yes.
Yeah. so a little bit of science, a little bit of military. So unfortunately, the climate crisis is upon us. When you were reading about the news, the article in the New Scientist, and when we were at school, it was something that was going to happen. And now it's something that's happening now, and that we see a lot of scary
it's costing
things.
2% of the world's GDP.
Yep. And we see, things like wildfires in winter in California, engulfing parts of Los Angeles.
People dying.
Yep.
Lots of people dying. Yep. 500,000 people die a year from extreme heat.
And of the 80 million people that die every year from various causes, 10% die from air pollution caused by burning fossil fuels. Yep. And do the fossil fuel companies pay any compensation or funeral costs? Not a thing. They're getting subsidised the opposite.
And so what do you think that we as science communicators can do to navigate this turbulent world where these events are happening now and they're scaring people? What should our priorities be at the moment?
Give an optimistic pathway out. So part of the background optimism is that a thing called the Flynn effect, where the IQ is going up by 9 IQ points every generation. Jeez. And this was discovered by looking at the IQs of military recruits beginning in 1932 in the USA, where IQ tests were done under hard military conditions, and it was found the same 9 IQ points per generation rise was happening in American civilians and every other country in the world. So today's generation is the smartest ever. Second bit of good news, you might find this hard to believe, but we are living in the most peaceful time ever in the history of the human race. Yep. read the book The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, or Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Third thing, we know the cure for climate change, which is keep fossil carbon in the ground. And all the things that we use fossil carbon for, we can use other things. For example, on one hand, I love cling wrap because it reduces wastage of food from the shop to the supermarket to your home by 40%. On the other hand, I hate it because it's made of a fossil fuel that doesn't break down, but you can make cling wrap that has exactly the same function from totally biodegradable soybean waste. Everything that we do with fossil fuels, we can do with something else. So we don't need fossil fuels for anything except to be able to keep on giving the fossil fuel companies 7% of the world's GDP. And by the way, when the head of Exxon retired recently, on top of his normal bonus, he took an extra bonus of $0.4 billion.
Whoa, what do you do with that sort
Not
of
too
money?
shabby, not too shabby.
What do you do with it? Like
nothing. Well,
Get the
I've written a story
expensive
on this
cat
called
food.
The 1%. Read Capitalism in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty to see how money is shifting from the poor to the wealthy.
Yeah.
If you're a young student, you're at school or you're doing an undergraduate and you want to get into talking about science in the media, what would you recommend that they do to
follow science communicators like me? Give me a ring and I'll give them a guided tour through the ABC, and I'm a regular science Triple J stuff that I do each week. You start telling stories, go onto social media. And also go onto your local community radio and try doing live stuff there, and that's a really good fast education, but definitely go onto social media.
So start small, build up your experience.
And just start building it up.
And for the general public, people listening at home who aren't working in science and don't necessarily have the capacity to work in media, what do you think they can do to feel like they're taking positive action amidst the climate crisis?
You got to do the small stuff like the boring recycling and the composting, but really the big one is that we're going to stop throwing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And then if we increase the sinks, we can start bringing the carbon dioxide levels down. And then if you follow on your fine research, tell us about your fine research so the audience knows about your simulations for the future.
Oh, yes. So looking at what the climate looks like once we reach net zero, or when we stop emitting carbon into the atmosphere. And for most of the world, it shows that temperatures don't go up anymore, but in some parts of the world, they do continue to go up. So
it's that sort of inertia thing.
Yes, it takes a long time.
It takes a long time. If you've got a car where it's broken down, you try to push it, you need a lot of energy from a few people to get it going.
Yeah.
Then if you stop pushing it, it still keeps on going.
Correct.
And if you want to slow it down, you've got to put in the same amount of energy.
Well, and the carbon stays in the atmosphere for a long time. It's not something that falls out in even in years or decades. It's never a few. It's a cumulative effect. It's a build-up of generations of emitting, not just the emissions that we're doing now. And that's something that we, I guess, don't fully grasp. I think we understand, but don't grasp the ramifications of that.
The fossil fuel companies have done a bad thing to the earth. And for me, the horrifying thing is that from their point of view, they knew about it in 1982, but the scientists all definitely agree in 1990. And of that extra 140 parts per million of carbon dioxide that have been put in the atmosphere, taking it from, say, 280 to 420, of all the extra carbon dioxide that's been put in the atmosphere, half has been put in since 1990, when the fossil companies knew the evil that they were doing. And it was as bad as some of the asbestos companies in Australia who knew that asbestos caused disease and lied.
Well, as smoking causes cancer,
and
lung
the tobacco
cancer. It's the
companies
same
lied.
thing. And that's what Naomi Orezeki's books point out.
And we had high officials in the tobacco companies going into American Senate committees saying, as far as I'm aware, there's no science showing that tobacco is bad for your health.
Outright
saying
lies.
this in the 1990s and later. They were lying.
Have you read, I've brought this up before, but Tim Winton's book, Juice?
No.
You should read it. It's only recently come out in the last few months, and it's post-apocalyptic Australia, post-climate change, no set date in the future. And it's, talking about the extreme events that occur and also who's responsible for that. I'll leave it there because it's worth reading and how they depict the story, but it's incredibly well done. It's very sobering at times because of how they describe the events, but also how they bring big oil to justice.
Well, I do think we need a touch of irrational optimism.
Yes,
And
always. There's always room for optimism.
Earlier this week, I was actually making an Aussie Rules football, and the person who did the screen printing was telling me how her father could have been killed twice in Chile, with the whole Pinochet thing and round up and taken to the stadium. There were too many holes to dig in the ground when they shot the bodies. So what they did was just drive them into the countryside and then set them running and then shot them with machine guns and he managed to avoid getting shot. And so other sorts of things happened to my father where he avoided being killed in 3 events in the Second World War. So I'd like to say, dearly beloved audience, a bit of irrational optimism helps, because when things go bad, your chances of surviving are better if you're optimistic, even if it's irrational.
Yes, agreed.
You actually will have a higher survival rate. And a study was done on this in the United Kingdom where they said, we're going to put banknotes in this magazine, and some people, they checked out their personalities, were irrationally pessimistic. They said, nah, I'm not going to look at it. And they didn't even open it up. And the ones who were optimistic opened them and found about 50 pounds in £5 notes. So being optimistic changes how you behave and your outcome.
I would agree with that. And there's always a reason to have hope. And even if you're feeling down in the dumps, I've said this before, but don't sit in that for too long. Turn that into anger and turn that into action.
Yep, positive action.
Exactly, positive action.
Rebellions are built on hope.
Absolutely.
That's one for I'm just going to leave that there. If you know, you know.
I don't know, so here we go. Yep.
Okay, we're just about out of time. We're going to be evacuated by a fire drill soon here at the University of Sydney.
A lockdown.
A lockdown.
Oh.
Yes, I've never had a lockdown before.
Will we be literally locked in?
Well, yes, and I'm curious, if you suppose there's something bad like a Tyrannosaurus Rex roaming around, surely they could break into the building and get us?
Well, I think
it be better to have a
T-Rex would be too big, but if Jurassic Park has taught us nothing, it's that raptors can get in and open the doors.
Yeah, they can. They're very intelligent. So we should run away rather than have a lockdown.
Yeah. Okay, let's get out before it's too late. Thank you so much to Dr. Karl for joining us, sharing your wisdom and insights from an amazing career, which is still going strong.
And we have all kinds of important episodes in the works, like looking at all things politics, renewable energy, ocean currents, and machine learning.
To catch those subjects and plenty more, keep listening to Totally Cooked.
And we'll tackle the climate crisis together.
Successfully.
Beautiful.
Hello, valued listener. It's Iain here in the Edit Suite, proudly announcing the conclusion of Season 1 of Totally Cooked. Thank you very much for joining us and supporting the podcast during its baby steps. Now we're heading on our summer break. Sarah, as we know, doesn't do field work, but maybe the heat waves will come to her. As her underlings, Zach and I aren't allowed holidays, so we'll be spending Christmas Day and New Year's Eve cooking up exciting new episodes and sending out invitations to the star researchers on our 2026 wish list. We'll be back on February 6th, launching into the stratosphere with a special episode from a recent live recording in Launceston. Watch out for the Season 2 trailer on your feeds in January, and let's get ready to tackle the climate crisis together.